The movie starts as Lucas, Roy, and Alton are hiding in a hotel room as the TV is reporting about them. On the news, the reporters are saying that they are looking for a kid named Alton and they strongly believe that Roy stole him. Anyone who has seen them is expected to report to the police. Soon they both start getting ready to leave the room. They have weapons and they also cover the room with cardboard. Roy goes over to get Alton, who was reading in the other room, and he was wearing goggles and noise-canceling headsets. As the three of them were pulling out of the parking lot, they were seen by a receptionist who was watching the news. Inside the car, Roy and Lucas learn that their car has been identified by the police. Lucas then turns the headlights off after wearing goggles to help him see better. He tells Alton to kill the light as they drive off in the dark. In their office, officials are gathered to watch the news. Calvin Meyer tells Doak to find and take Alton from Roy since he won't give him up easily and he is called to live for this purpose. Meyer walks into a podium where people are gathered. He reads them something odd from scripture and they start to chant numbers. Outside the podium, the FBI and many soldiers started to circle the place the people were in, and one of the federals talked to Meyer. Meyer tells the people to listen carefully to what the federal government has to tell them. The federal goes on to explain that they have search warrants and that they are going to take the people to a school so they can search them. He tells them all to remain calm as they remove them from the place they were gathered. As they are still driving in the dark, Lucas gets down to turn the headlights on and they almost run into a car but miss. But soon another car comes from the opposite direction and hits the car they missed, which makes Lucas get off and check on the passenger. It was a woman and she was unconscious. A police car approaches them and Lucas tells him to call an ambulance. But as the police were about to do so, he saw their car and knew who they were. Roy gets out of the car and he tells Lucas to shoot him. Lucas then wounds the police and calls for help, telling them his location, and leaves. In the car, they calm Alton down and tell him to buckle up as they continue to drive. Once the people reached the school, they were made to gather around and they were given questionnaires to be filled out. The questions mentioned about Alton Meyer. In a classroom, Meyer is being questioned about the ranch when a guy named Paul from NSA walks in. He then starts to tell Meyer the combination numbers they were reading at the sermon is highly confidential government information which was transmitted by satellite through a heavily encrypted format on the day of the reading at the sermon. Meyer tells him he got the readings from the boy, meaning Alton. When they ask him if he's his son, he explains that he adopted him but his real father is Roy. Meyer tells them that Alton speaks in tongues and different languages too. He wrote them down and the older people took them as their scripture, believing those are the words of God. He tells them sternly that they have no idea what they're dealing with. Roy and Lucas got to their friend's house with Alton. Eldon prepared a bed for them and Roy stayed with Alton to get him to sleep. He puts noise-canceling headsets on him and leaves, turning the lights off. In the living room, Lucas and Eldon were watching national news about Alton. Eldon then brings Roy a drink and also coordinates to talk about them, but Roy tells him he's tired. Eldon used to live in the ranch with them and Roy asks if he misses living back there with them, but Eldon tells him he doesn't. The next morning, Roy woke up when the house was shaking from an earthquake. He and Lucas both run to get Alton. Alton was in bed and Eldon was on him. A spectrum of blue lights coming out of Alton was connected to his. As the house shook and the roof opened up, Roy hit Eldon in the head before covering Alton's eyes, which were burning because of the light. Roy then takes Alton and puts in a shadow and clams him with Dawn. Lucas was confused and standing by, unable to do anything. The people at the school were still being interviewed. They explained that Alton's power started to get stronger as he got older. They let him sleep in the daytime and he'd be awake at night, and that's why their services are all at night now. They believed that March 6th was their judgment day, and if Alton was with them on that day, they all would be saved. Then all the people were taken back to the ranch. Levi and Doak got to the back and took out some bags. Roy tells Lucas to get Alton into Eldon's van and they leave. Roy then has a talk with Eldon and he tells him he needs to see him again and that's why he did what he did. As they were headed to the supermarket, Alton started speaking Spanish. Lucas was amazed when he saw Alton was speaking the same as the radio. Roy then gets mad at Alton for leaving the van when he was talking on the payphone. A woman approached Alton and almost took his goggles off, thinking he was lost, but luckily she didn't recognize them from the news. Soon the whole parking lot was hit by asteroid-like fireballs. The three of them got in the van and escaped on time. Alton starts to have a nosebleed, but they keep driving while Roy tries to keep Alton from bleeding. As they reach Sarah, Alton's mother, she lets them into her house. She and Troy watched as Alton played. Sarah kisses Alton goodnight and she finds Lucas and Roy at the door. They tell her that he's getting weaker. Lucas suggests that they better take him to a hospital, but Roy dismisses him, saying he needs to make it until Friday, and Sarah agrees with Roy. Levi and Doak went to Sarah's mother holding guns and weapons. Paul and the rest of the team traveled with a helicopter to see the gas station chaos. They learned that Alton brought down an Air Force satellite. Paul was told that he is now the new expert on the case and he had to cancel the interviews. While they were watching the news, Roy tells Sarah to ask Lucas to move the van to the back. As Sarah and Lucas talk, she learns that he was Roy's friend before Roy moved to the ranch. 3 nights ago, Roy went to his house and asked for help. He tells her he saw the thing Alton does with his eyes and that it's very powerful. When they were driving at night, Alton tells them he did what happened at the gas station because he knew the police were watching him. Soon Alton started to have a hard time breathing, and once he was calm his eyes started to light up with the blue lights through the goggles and it blinded them all. After adjusting to the light, Sarah followed Alton, who was on the ground. The grass he stepped on was visibly turning dead as he got sick. Lucas fights with Roy to convince him that they need to get Alton to a hospital as he is dying, but Alton gets up and tells them Sarah and Lucas should get in the car and leave, for Roy and he will go into the woods. Soon they find a cave that has water. Alton was getting weaker and more sick. He tells Roy that he needs to be awake during the day in the sun. Paul is in his office trying to understand the coordinates they find from Alton. Soon he discovers that they are not going to Atlanta. Doak and Levi were sitting in Eldon's kitchen after discovering the van belonged to him when he walked in. Sarah tells Lucas that Roy has something he believes in and he has done what she couldn't do. He tells her to get some rest. In the morning Roy took Alton to the fields. As the sun comes up Alton starts to shake and the ground also starts to shake and crack. When the sun finally hits him, Alton releases some power that creates a dome upon him and Roy. Still in the daylight, Roy and Alton showed up at the hotel where Lucas and Sarah were staying. Alton's face looked better and he wasn't wearing his goggles. Alton then goes on to explain that he saw the sunlight, he saw a world on top of theirs, and he believes that there are people like him there. As he was talking his hands started to glow and his eyes were showing light too. All of them tell him that they believe him. As the four of them were leaving the room, Lucas got shot by Levi and Doak. Then they tie Roy, Lucas, and Sarah before abducting Alton and taking him with them. Sarah unties herself and helps the others. Then they start following Doak and Levi. But they got into a traffic jam and they were forced to stay in line. They see a helicopter flying off taking Alton. They learn that now Alton is under the government. Alton is sitting in an investigation room where a childhood development counselor is asking him about the incident at the gas stations and his father. He refuses to answer any of the questions, but he tells them he wants to talk to Paul alone. Alton then freezes the screen, making it look like he's sitting, and Paul walks into the room where he is. Alton then tells Paul about the other world he saw and how the people there have been watching them and that he needs to go where he belongs. Then that light came from his eyes through the goggles and Paul also saw that. Suddenly all the payphones started to ring where Roy, Lucas and Sarah were standing. Roy answers one of them and Paul on the other line. He tells him that Alton is safe with him and he needs to find them to return him. To bring him to Roy he tells him the coordinates of where they will have to meet in 2 hours. He then got rid of the phone and the card he used to call them. Alton walks over to a parked car and starts it, letting Paul drive. Paul arrives with Alton and gives him back to them. He tells them that the FBI knows where they will go and Alton tells them he knows he can help. As they are leaving, Paul asks if he can join them, but Roy tells him he can't. Paul asks Lucas if he can have his handcuffs to make it seem like he did what he did because he was forced or something. Lucas gave his handcuffs to Paul and they left. Somewhere under a bridge they all get into vests and Alton asks Roy if he's scared. He tells him not to worry about him as he dresses him, but Roy replies to him that he will always worry about him no matter what, and that's always been the deal. Roy tells Lucas that he doesn't need to come with them and that he's done a lot more than he should, but Lucas tags along with them to help. Alton locates them where fewer soldiers are and Roy tells Sarah and Alton to get down and that she needs to cover him. Roy drives the car through the fences where the soldiers are waiting and Alton tells them not to fire. The airbags in the car go off as he goes past the soldiers and the spikes get to the tires. Alton tells Roy to stop the car and once he does Alton gets off. Sarah follows him into the woods and they disappear. Once Sarah and Alton reach the open fields, Alton leaves Sarah behind and walks into the grass. Soon Sarah witnesses when Alton's eyes start to light up and the ground starts to shake. Roy and Lucas were driving on the road but the car was losing its speed and the wheel was not working. Alton's hand and eyes kept emitting light until there was a dome that was visible to all. The dome was big enough to cover lots of places. Once they all open their eyes they see the new world Alton was telling them about. The car Roy and Lucas were driving crushed, leaving them upside down inside before they saw the new world and were mesmerized by what they were seeing. Paul saw everything from where Roy and Lucas left him. Everyone saw the new world, which has tall buildings. Sarah sees lights coming out of the woods and walks past her to approach Alton, who smiles at her once they reach him. They exchange a knowing nod to say goodbye and Alton disappears, taking the dome down with him. He nods his head to Sarah as goodbye and disappears, taking the dome down with him. Roy and Lucas were lying upside down in their crashed car when the soldiers came up to seize them. Then they went into a questioning room. The FBI was questioning Lucas about where Sarah had disappeared with Alton, but he told him he didn't know, but tells if Alton didn't want to be seen they wouldn't see him. He tells them his story won't change because it's the truth. Unsatisfied with his answer, the agent sends Paul to question Lucas more. They pretended not to know each other, kept what happened between them and continued the questioning. The movie ends when Sarah is in a bathroom cutting her hair short to change her appearance. Roy is in a cell where they have put wires in his head and his hands are tied. He looks up to the sky and his eyes start to light up when the screen goes black. With that the movie ends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.